there's another update.
Welcome all of you. This show at 7:30 today. Open dialogue, and we have a very important discussion. And the discussion is Free Our Temples. Now, Free Our Temples is a movement of which Mr. T.R. Ramesh, who is joining us today, is a great activist and a very well-known figure to all those who are desirous of freeing our temples and who are involved in any manner in the movement. All of them know Sri T.R. Ramesh is done human work in Tamil Nadu and also in one of other places, So welcome Sri T.R. Ramesh ji, and also we have Dr. Bharat Gupta, who all of us know, he's a classicist. His study of Indian knowledge traditions, Indian temple traditions, is second to none. So, Sri Ramesh, I will start with you. We have seen that while you have notched up some significant successes in the south in getting some temples out of the clutches of the government, and at the same time, now in the north of India and even in the east of India, there seems to be a counter movement to take over more and more temples. What do you think about it?
The upholding of the Chardham Devasthan Act 2019 that is passed by the Uttarakhand BJP government, the act was challenged by Dr. Subramanian Swamy and only by Dr. Subramanian Swamy. Of course, some Devasthan people, the trustees also subsequently joined. But the act was upheld by the division bench, Honorable Division Bench of Uttarakhand. In my humble opinion, it's a very faulty judgment. But that judgment has made the officials or the persons interested in taking over temples more brazen in other states. That's what I see. It's happening in Odisha now, it's happening in Bihar. Okay, BJP is supposed to be a Hindutva party. They themselves have come up with a special legislation to take over not ordinary temples but the Chardham themselves. Why not we do it in our state? That seems to be the thinking right now. So they have become more brazen, they have become more ambitious in taking over. Another thing I noticed is the Lingaraj temple, Bhubaneswar, the world famous temple. The special committee has been formed, a special act has come. Something in line with the Puri Jagannath temple. Instead of opposing it, the BJP minister, Mr. Pradhan, he says, I have a list of another 4 temples that you need to take over. So there seems to be a concerted effort in taking over, especially in the north and the east, as you say, sir. This is very, very saddening because it makes Article 26, the fundamental right for religious sampradayas to administer their own institutions, a minority right. It is not available to Hindus, it looks like.
Quite right. And let me go over to Professor Bharat Gupta. As I was just opening the remarks, there was a question that just popped up. And that was saying that this kind of activity of taking over temples is normalized in the name of saying that, okay, there is a lot of corruption. Well, my standard counter has always been that you do not cut off the head to cure the headache. If you have a headache, then you administer medicine. You don't simply cut off the head. So if there is corruption in Christian missions also. In fact, there is more corruption in Christian missions and the madrasas and such things than you can ever imagine in the temples. Yet, this kind of standard argument is taken up. And in my opinion, the political class, the entire political class, doesn't matter whether it is this color or that color, it is mainly interested in taking over temples for the influence that it commands. And they think that their political ambitions can be fulfilled through the temples. Sir, I want you to please give us an overview. I am not yet talking of the constitutionality of Article 26, but the basic principles that are involved in consecrating a temple and why it is important that the sampradaya that actually consecrates the temple must remain in possession of that. After that, I will come to the Article 26 that actually recognizes that right, and then we will go to Sri Ramesh.
You see, my view is that this is a very complicated problem and it has to be taken care of at 3 or 4 levels. First of all, it has to be taken care of in terms of history, and we have to make it clear that so far, starting with the British, because during the Islamic period the temples were either destroyed or they were left alone. So there was no such state that the government or the king or the Shah would take over. There was nothing of that sort. But this starts with the British. This starts with the British with the whole intention that the money is taken in and that there is a reform in the temple. You see, this whole idea which has been built up is that Hindus are mismanaging their whole thing. Hindus have to be taught by the white man as part of the white man's burden as to how to manage things. And therefore their temples also, their spirituality, etc. Now under the garb of that, the Congress government did this, and now the BJP government has also done it. So we have to first of all counter at that level, and we have to tell any political party, whether BJP, Congress or whatsoever, that Hindus, the majorities, the 80% people of this land will manage their temple not only because it is their constitutional right under Article 26, that's a minor matter, but because this has been the tradition of 5,000 years. You see, there were all kinds of temples in our history. Now, there were some which may be called royal temples. But they were royal temples because the king started that temple right from the scratch. And then in the ancient system, even if the king started it from scratch, if he gave all the money and he maintained it, still he was not running the temple. The running of the temple had to be done by a certain class of people who belong to that particular deity sampradaya. If this temple was a Shaiv temple, then it would be done according to the Shaiv tradition, Shaiv agamas, by the people who were practicing and doing the sadhana for that deity. So this is the fundamental Hindu principle, and this needs to be argued in all courts of law at all levels, whether district court, high court or the Honorable Supreme Court, that Hindu alone can do it. No reform business, because if reform business comes in, then we'll have a stalemate like we had a stalemate in Sabarimala. Because the modern state, the enlightened state, does not know how to conduct the rituals. Therefore, it is a primary right of the Hindu to do his puja, to do his worship. This has to be now taken and undertaken at a very wide scale. Therefore, the taking over of the temple is illegal, unconstitutional, non-spiritual and anti-Hindu per se. So we have to mount a very big nationwide program in order to let the Hindus be aware of it in terms of politics and in terms of voting, in terms of relationship with BJP as well. This is one thing. The other thing is that we must start thinking very seriously in constitution, in making those bodies which can take over the temples once the Honorable Supreme Court or the local court says, okay, we give the temple back to you, but who shall take it over? You see, this is also a problem. It's a big problem, and I know Mr. Ramesh would be able to enlighten us a lot about how this has happened and where Hindus have failed. So this is the second thing, that we should nationally say that, okay, there was a time when kings could take over, there was a time when there were Agam Shastris, there was a time when there were practitioners of the old kind, and there were Dharmakartas and Dankartas, but now we have a new class which can do it. We can have committees which correspond with all those purposes, all those aims and objectives of a temple, which can consist of the architects, the people who know the Agam Shastra, the scholars of Sanskrit, the scholars of Prakrit and other languages, dancers, performers, all those people who can make life of a temple which is helpful and which makes Hinduism flourish in that region according to the practices of that region. So this is the second challenge, and we have to start making those committees. We have to, I would go to the extent of saying that we can hypothetically say that we will get this temple back and such date, and this committee will take over. We should start proposing, we should make it clear so that nobody can say that, what if we give it back to you, it will fall into a den of corruption again. And then the third step is to expose and write as to how temple wealth is being misappropriated by the secular state. How the secular state, how the administrators appointed by the secular state, including very highly trained officials of the Indian administrative services, have resulted in endemic corruption, and how these people are unqualified. We have to start writing about it, that how is it possible that somebody whom the government appoints because he is a good officer or somebody in the good books of the government, he shall be able to handle the temple affairs. This is impossible. Nobody does it in Europe. Nobody appoints a bishop because he is in the good books of the government. How can this happen with the secular state? So these are the 3 points. We have to extensively talk about it and mount an intellectual offensive. This is my submission. Okay,
Quite right. Now with your extensive experience, Mr. Ramesh, I think there is something very important that comes to the fore, even when we talk about the Constitution. Professor Bharat Gupta talked about the secular state interfering in the affairs of only the Hindus. They do not interfere with anyone. Whereas in Article 25, the freedom of conscience and religion is granted uniformly to all. Secondly, the term that is used in the Constitution is that everybody shall have freedom subject to so many restrictions. Well, shall have the freedom to practice, profess, and propagate. Now, my question always has been to the governments who do this, how do you ensure that the persons who are in charge of a temple or were made in charge of the temple are in consonance with these 3 objectives? Are they going to propagate? Are they going to profess? And are they going to practice? I have seen officers getting appointed as chairman of these committees, and they've never done a puja in their house. They neither have astha nor do they have any other, okay, they are not neither Karmakandi nor they are Jnanamargi. In fact, they are essentially what we can call that they suffer from that disease called secularitis. And I speak as 35 years of experience in the IAS. Okay? Then, of course, that question that you brought up about the Sampradayas, that the Sampradaya rights have essentially become minority rights. Please advise us and enlighten us with your experience in litigating and succeeding in those litigations. What are the takeaways from those litigations which we can utilize in the litigation that we are going to join, or we ought to join in the latest takeover attempts? Also, do please tell us what are the loopholes in the judgment in Uttarakhand. In fact, I had read the submissions and I myself felt that the submissions that were made by Dr. Swami's team were probably weak. So you have studied those judgments extensively. So please do advise us on these 3 or 4 counts.
Okay, you've given me a lot of agenda here. First of all, Sanjayji, my hearty congratulations on getting Professor Bharatji on board in this. His words should be etched in golden letters. What he spoke about the Sampradayas and what he spoke about the alternate system, and what he spoke about the government committing offences against the constitution, against dharma, against sampradaya. You should record that and keep it as a separate bite. Very, very telling for the entire Hindu population who are worried about temples being taken over left, right and center. My congratulations and my pronouns to Professor. Coming to professing, practicing and propagating. Now, if you may take a little time,
Yes, sure.
an average Hindu, he is not very keen on professing. He is a Hindu. I'm talking about average people. Ordinary Hindus, they want to style themselves secular wherever possible. And if they are in the company of people of other religion, they don't even want to mention their Hindu names. And if at all they profess, they look at each side and then see who they are and then they profess. They profess within their houses, they profess within a temple. There too sometimes they are not clearly professed. Practicing, now if you are under government control, your ability to practice is curtailed. It's definitely curtailed. Government interferes in so many things. It lays the budget. It tells you how to do a ritual these days. In fact, Tamil Nadu is infamous in forcing the temples to celebrate the death anniversary of a former or late atheist chief minister. He was not only an atheist, he called for the burning of the Saivite and Vaishnavite texts, including Ramayana. His death anniversary is celebrated, is observed in temples, and Annadan is made in his name every year on 3rd February. So your practice is overturned, curtailed, derailed, everything. Propagation is probably the most important thing. If you are practicing dharma, you should also have shishyas who practice, or your very own shishyas. They should be able to be propagated in the right way and celebrated. And now, with government control, propagation is almost nil. There are only very few places where a temple can run a TV station, like Tirupati, because they get extraordinary income, they are doing it. But 20-25 temples in South India, another 40 temples in North India can run their own channels, their own propagation, their own publications, etc., etc. But it's not done. Puri Jagannath temple had 40,000 acres. Where are they? Without artha, you cannot practice dharma. Your source of artha is curtailed, it is closed, If at all it trickles, it is taken away. So today, Hindus right under Article 25 to profess, practice, and propagate is definitely diminished. Now, coming to the Article 26, as I already said, this has now become a minority right. Hindus have to prove they are a denomination. Now, first of all, what is denomination? The term denomination. It is a Western term mainly to denote church and church-oriented institutions. Our Honorable Supreme Court in Shirur Math case have taken the definition of the term denomination from an Oxford Dictionary of 1897. The judgment came on 1954, but they took the dictionary meaning of 1897. And there were 5 meanings. The fifth meaning they took, of the fifth meaning they took only half. A collection of people classed by the same name they ignored. Now if you take Ayyappa temple, a collection of people classed under the same name, then Sabarimala will be a denominational temple. Shirur Math ignored it. The Constitution Bench in Sabarimala judgment, they also ignored it. In fact, they said, you are not a denomination. Yes, I'm not a denomination, but I'm a Sampradaya. In 1897, the Parliament adopted the Hindi version of the Constitution. And the Hindi version says, Prati ek dharmik sampradaya, every religious denomination. Nothing will be left out. Every, Prati ek dharmik sampradaya, kisi anubad. Now why are they denied? I am a Indic religion, I am a Jain, or I am a Shaivite, or I am a Vaishnavite. And if I go before a High Court or a Supreme Court and I say, treat me as a Sampradaya and guarantee me the fundamental religious and administrative rights which Article 26 is guaranteeing every other religion. The Shiites are having it, the Sunnis are having it, the Catholics, the Protestants, the Amish, the Jews. But if you are a Hindu means you are, then Jains also come in. Jains are suffering a lot because of the classification of Hindus, their temples. They are not able to, manage themselves without interference. So, 1897 definition, the Supreme Court is clinging on to it, and more and more restrictions came to the definition. While every fundamental right got expanded, the right to life, the right to liberty, everything got expanded, the right to managing your own affairs in religion and administering your properties and your institution has become more and more constricted. You were talking about IAS officers. Supreme Court in Shirur Math judgment said every math is a denomination, is a religious denomination. Now, 10 years ago, a Matadipati passed away, and there was a little fight between who will be the next Matadipati. So, what the government did is, they denied both of them the stature of Matadipati. They appointed the assistant commissioner of the region as the Matadipati. Now, will that fellow will come in his pants and shoes and sit there and in a yogic posture, and will he ordain his Sishyas or the Mata? What does he know about that Sampradaya? Forget he practicing anything at home. How is he qualified to be the in-charge Matadipati? Now, coming to the courts, you are asking the litigation problems and other things. The biggest problem is, Shirur Math said, went by the Western definition, church-oriented definition, still there was a scope. It said a common name, a common faith, and an organization. And the organization need not be a brick and mortar organization, because Shirur Math said, the judgment it was said, spiritual organization. But the courts reinvent the definition again and again, and they add the words, they must be an organization. Why should it be an organization? The difference between the Western religions and the Indic religions are that they are exclusive. In a church, from birth to baptism to burial. Only the church members can participate. A Catholic child will not be baptized in the Protestant church. Similarly, their burial grounds will not open for another denomination. But in Hindus, it's not like that. I may have an acharya, I may be a Shaivite, but I will not be stopped going to a Vaishnavite acharya or to a Vaishnavite temple or inviting the Vaishnavite acharya to my humble house. The acharya will grace me. This is so inclusive. And courts are now saying, no, there are all sort of people are coming to Sabarimala, so it's not a denomination. Who said so? As Professor said, the denomination or the sampradaya will be determined by the rituals, by the agamas of the deity. There are 5 major Ayyappa temples in Kerala, of which Sabarimala temple, Ayyappa temple is a different temple. It is not open throughout the year. It is open only for a few days in a month. You have to observe penance to go there. It's a different temple. And the Lord, who in his avatar there, is in a different form. He is an Aishtika Brahmachari. So, the deity, the form, the avatar, or the paddhati by which he is consecrated, that determines the sampradaya of the temple. And those who follow that sampradaya need to be there in the religious affairs as well as the administrative affairs. How many times do we tell this to the court? You said that Dr. Swami's arguments were perhaps weak. No, they were not weak. Let me assure you. They were one of the strongest arguments ever placed. The Act, the Uttarakhand Act itself talks about denominations, but that is denied in the judgment. More loyal than the king. I'm sure the Supreme Court, Honorable Supreme Court, will overturn this judgment, set it aside, and restore the religious and administrative rights of various sampradayas. You cannot mix Gangotri, Yamunotri, Kedarnath and Badrinath into one roll, one unit. You cannot mix their income. It is not done. They are different. Of course, the same people might go to all the Char Dhams. If God willing, they have the Bhagyam, they will go. But these 4 are different temples. Who is the government to take over them in the name of development? Only for instances of proven mismanagement you can take over a religious institution, and that includes Christian and Islamic institutions also, but which is never carried out. You can take over Christian institutions under the Societies Act or whatever their registered trust or whatever, but nobody does that. But Hindu temples, if there is a mismanagement in one particular area, supposing they say there are 3 festivals in the temple, and in one of the festivals, and on the 3rd day there is some corruption, they take over the entire temple forever. There is no period of operation mentioned in any of the orders of the takeover. And in Sabarimala judgment, the Supreme Court said, when the period of operation is not mentioned in the order of takeover, it is per se arbitrary, illegal and unjust. That order needs to be thrown to the dustbin. Let me tell you, in Tamil Nadu, 70 main temples, government has been a squatter from 13th December 1951. It is 70 years ago that Honorable Division Bench of the Madras High Court declared certain provisions by which they had taken over these temples, and the judgment of the Division Bench was upheld by Shirur Math judgment, but still the government has not left these temples. They are still there. So the government is an encroacher, the government is a squatter, and Hindus are blissfully ignorant of it. Dr. Swami Dayananda Saraswati's case is languishing in Supreme Court from 2012. There has not been a single effective hearing so far. Single effective hearing. There have been hearings, but none of the points mentioned in the petition were discussed so far. And this is a case about millions and millions of Hindus their fundamental rights. If the Babus, if the politicians are a problem for denying Hindus their fundamental rights, courts taking their own time, or courts repeating itself, is a big problem. What needs to be decided in 15 minutes, they take 15 years, especially in temple matters. There is a case pending from Pondicherry about a matha for about 23 years. And finally, when the matter came for hearing, they said tag it along with Dayanand Saraswati Swami case. And after tagging, it's waiting for another 6 years. The delays of court, as Shakespeare said, it's a major problem, and it's a problem for Hindus. We go to the court with precedents, with the constitution, and yet we just get notice issued. We go to the court with proofs of the Babus misusing the money, diverting the money. We don't get a final order for years together. That has been my main problem. Sanjay ji.
Yet you have succeeded in a number of cases.
Yeah, in a number of cases, but
to hear about them.
okay. You heard about Emperor Rajaraja Chola.
Yes.
He built the Tanjavur Brihadeeswara temple, which is one of the first 4 UNESCO heritage centers in India. Brihadeeswara temple, Ajanta caves, Taj Mahal, and Mahabalipuram. So it's such a wonderful piece of work of art, grandeur, heritage, etc. There in January, the consecration was to be held. Some fringe groups said, no, you cannot do it in Magudagama, you have to do it in Tamil Agamas. First of all, there is no Agama of Tamil. The Agamas are from Vedas, and Vedas are not Sanskrit, it's a Vedic language. Perhaps Vedic language is from their Sanskrit.
Right.
So, we go to the court. Even though there is a division bench judgment, and even though there is a law that you can't introduce innovations, I have to go and fight. And I got a judgment, which is not very explicit, but still, the temple consecration went as per tradition. And on December 5th, there is a consecration in another temple, which is 1500 years old. Another division bench says, if the next time there comes a case that why Tamil mantras are not used, we will levy 10 lakh rupees penalty on the temple. I mean, there is one division judgment and second division bench judgment. Yet, another division bench passes an interim order saying, why is it not being held in Tamil? It's not a question of which is a superior language, Tamil or English. It's a question of tradition, it's a question of Agama, it's a question of faith and belief which cannot be violated. How many cases do I fight? Professor wants to say something.
Yeah, I just want to add something to what you have very beautifully pointed out. You see, the disease is something else. The disease is that since 19th century, there seems to be a bacteria or a virus or something within Hindus called reformism, where all this reform is conducted according to Christian lines, according to Christian guidelines, or according to English language. The unfortunate thing is that our judiciary, exceptions of course are there, but our judiciary as a whole is not familiar with Indian languages, let alone Sanskrit or Agam Shastra. They are simply not familiar even with Tamil, even with Telugu, even with Malayalam or Hindi, because they don't understand the definitional terms. You see, you gave the example of going to look for denomination and definition in Oxford English Dictionary. Now this is sheer ignorance. All you have to do is to see that in India there is a darshana, there is a darshanacharya, then according to that darshana there is the swarupa of a deity which has been evolved according to a certain sampradaya which is practiced by bhaktas, and it is for the sake of bhaktas that God exists. It is for the sake of those worshippers that God is there in the temple. They have made the temple. Where does the secular state have anything to do with it? You see, it's a matter of principle. The Hindu makes his own God. The Hindu sees the avatar according to his bhakti. This has been there right from the Vedic times. This is the whole tradition. So if you look at that, there is no question of making a uniform reform for Hinduism. And you see, this is a disease. It started with Chacha Nehru because he made all kinds of reforms for Hindus in the Hindu Marriage Act. And then he finally said, well, I could not do this for my Muslim sisters, I could not do this for another denomination. But that was sheer hypocrisy. You don't want to do it. You only want to reform Hindus because you want to plunder their wealth, you want to take away their money where you have no right to do so. I think Hindus have to speak out, ask this question from the politicians and from the political class, and unless we are loud and clear and argumentative, we will not be able to solve our problems. As you have said, that it is deliberate that the courts don't take up the matters, that they don't give time for hearing. Otherwise, it can be certainly disposed of in a week or so. Sanjay ji.
Yes, Mr. Ramesh, you wanted to say something on this?
Yes. For example, the Chidambaram case, which got a very fantastic judgment, thanks to Dr. Swami and thanks to senior counsels Shreyas Vaidyanathan and Venkatramani, in 2014. This was a repeat of 1951. 1951, they were declared a denomination, and it was declared the government had no presence there, and they are a unique sampradaya, and government appealed against it and went to Supreme Court and the judgment came in 1954. A constitutional bench dismissed it. Yet, the government of Tamil Nadu appointed an executive officer, overturning the observations of Supreme Court, and the High Court upheld the order of the Tamil Nadu government in spite of a constitutional bench judgment. The judicial discipline or the lack of it, that is never spoken by media. Everything is in the name of Jati, and no Brahmins are administering this temple. This is not correct. They are not Tamilians. How can people who have a history of 2000 years be not Tamilians in Chidambaram? In fact, Chidambaram Dikshita's, I'm challenging anybody, are the only community who have been in one place for 20 centuries, doing the same social, religious work they have been doing and not moving away from them. Nowhere in the world you will find anybody like that. Nowhere. Even the Andaman, these tribals, or the Amazon tribals, they would have been living as they were did for 20 centuries, but there's nothing to say that they were in the same place. And this Chidambaram Dikshitas, they should be recognized for intangible cultural heritage by UNESCO. And such a micro community, the DMK government wanted to break, make them disappear, because they are an icon of science. The object of the Dravidian administrators is to somehow break Hinduism, dilute the icons of Hinduism, and that's behind the takeover of temples. On one hand, they want to dilute the icons, they want to dilute the beliefs. On the other hand, they want to deny the true income of temples. Tirumala Tirupati Devasthan had a problem during COVID. They could not pay salaries. The reason is, in the last 6-7 years, the salary bill has doubled. The governments have appointed people indiscriminately because they get capital receipts for each appointment. But the institution that suffers is the temple. Instead of using that wealth for propagation of dharma, for the maintenance of dharmic institutions of Hinduism, of Vaishnavism, they started appointing people and the COVID exposed them. So, the sooner we get government out of our temples, the better it is for our dharma. We can have a renaissance, we can have a revival, we can build true institutions, we can give employment to hundreds of thousands of people in our own Hindu schools, Hindu colleges, Hindu hospitals. We need not enrich people of other religion, their institutions. And our own institutions will teach our children the culture and values which they ought to grow up with. And this is the power of temples. This is the power of dharma and with artha. This has been denied to Hindus across India for 70 years. 40,000 acres denied in Puri temple. 30,000 acres denied in Vedaranyeshwara temple in Tamil Nadu. 275,000 acres taken away from temples in Kerala. And in Kerala, Hindus are now a minority. 20,000 acres taken away from Hindu temples in Kanyakumari district. And in Kanyakumari district, Hindus are today a minority. You lose your land, you lose your place. Hindu lands or Hindu space, Hindu temple lands. And the Tamil Nadu government wanted to give the Hindu temple lands to encroachers. And they passed an order in September 2019. I went to the court, and thanks to my counsel, M.R. Venkatesh, and a very good bench, we got a stay order of that. The moment we lose this temple lands in Tamil Nadu is already reeling due to anti-Hindu forces there. The moment the temple lands go, a church or a mosque will come there, or their institutions will come there, the demography will change, the identity of people will change. And that's why government should go out of temples.
I think you made a very important point that the temples, the role of the temples in propagation of dharma, in keeping dharma alive, keeping the dharmic institution alive, is critical to the very survival of the Sanatana Dharma. I go to Professor Bharat Gupta again. Sir, you are not only well versed in our Shastras, but you also know the workings of the government. Now, can we have some kind of a practical strategy where at least a government or a political party that is in the government and that professes openly, almost openly, that it supports the causes of Hindus, can at least be sensitized? Because right now I feel that a vast majority of all the people forget the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy can be written off as far as this particular thing is concerned. I'll speak from my own experience. What about the political people? After all, they are coming from the grassroots, and most of them in their private life are devout Hindus. How is it that they are not getting sensitized to this very, very critical and I would say almost a life and death matter for the Hindus?
Well, my answer is this, that unfortunately, neither the RSS nor the BJP as a party have looked upon the true cultural ability of Hinduism to revive economy. You say, when they say that Ayodhya is going to have an aerodrome, Ayodhya is going to have religious tourism, then all they mean is exploitation of the religious places in order to build modern technology, hotels and all those things which make the place an entertainment park. But they don't understand that a traditional Hindu temple was a great economy spinner. You see, when the great temple complexes started coming into existence from 3rd century, 2nd, 3rd century in India, the amount of economy they generated and the amount of economy they controlled was fantastic. As a matter of fact, most of the richness of the economy, sheer money, was around the temple complexes, because people came and they gave money in nyas to the deity, and then the deity distributed that money to all sections of people, to the scholars at the top, to the Brahmins, by Brahmins I mean to the learned, to the musicians, to the dancers, to the poets, to scholars of various other kinds, and people then who were working with the economy, like carpenters and masons and charioteers and those who kept horses and elephant. I mean, why were elephants kept in the temple? They were not just kept in order for big show. That was part of the economy, because the gaja was, or the elephant was, one major part of the ancient economy. So if you understand that temples are going to generate in modern times wealth also, because they can manage institutions, they can manage universities, they can manage hospitals. After all, they were doing that earlier also. The temples were taking care of miles and miles of the roads, miles and miles of the trees. They were offering employment to hundreds and thousands of peasants and farmers on their lands. So the temples have always been doing this, and the temples can always do this again. It is a city within the city that a temple is, and it is an economy spinner in this sense. Not that you impose a Western model of tourism, where lots of people lie around in the sun naked and in bikinis. I mean, that's not the Indian national model of cultural tourism. The cultural tourism is our heritage, which is woven around our temples. It is entirely around our temples. Once the ruling party understands this, once the BJP understands this, this will change. And I hope, at personal level, I always try to make these efforts, and whenever I meet somebody senior in the hierarchy, I mention this to him or her. But I think we have to do this nationally. We have to write more about it. We have to bring out shows on it. We have to mention it in all kinds of media. And now with the new media, we have to circulate this awareness that temples are healthy economy. They are not dens of corruption or Brahminism or some kind of retro fitted activity in the minds. This is the most fundamental thing that we have to do.
Okay, I go to Mr. Ramesh again. I come to something pragmatic, and this is just loud thinking. It is not really related to any constitutional matter or even any dharmic matter. This is pure pragmatism, because I have worked with the politicians throughout my career, and I know how their mind works. Okay, Is there a method by which we can convince the politician that freeing the temple will help them electorally?
There should be a demand from the Hindu populace. I want my temple to be free and free from government control, and I want my temple to realize the potential, which Professor just said, of sprucing up the area where it is established. First, Hindus should believe in that. And slowly that is happening, I think, in my opinion. From now they realize, I keep harping the same point in many of my presentations, that the true income from the immovable properties of Tamil Nadu temples, mutts and endowments is close to $1 billion. It's close to 6,000, 7,000 crore rupees a year. And today government is realizing 200 crore rupees, which is a trickle, which is nothing. And for collecting this 200 rupees, they charge you 240 rupees as administrative and audit fees, which means the temples are actually making a loss. Their hundi money and other collections, other donations are going to the government. And the net result is a minus. If you get 6,000 crore rupees from the Tamil Nadu temples, immovable properties, 4,75,000 acres of agricultural lands, 30 crore square feet of sites, and 22,600 buildings, you get this fair rent, not even the market rent, you get the fair rent, 6,000 crore rupees. Imagine the amount of institution building you can do every year in every taluk, and keep expanding it. Education is something now every parent is giving importance to. We can give fantastic education coupled with Hindu values, cultural values, but only if we build our own institutions. We can run our own hospitals, we can run Ayurvedic hospitals too, Veda Pathashalas, Agama Pathashalas, publication of our Shastras, Puranas for adults as well as children. All this is possible with the wealth which is being denied right now. Now, we have to go with these kind of awareness building with the Hindu populace, then only they know what they are missing. Then that might turn to, the moment they start asking the politicians, are you going to release my temples? The politicians who come asking for votes, are temples going to be under the government? What about the properties? When are they going to realize the fair income? Then the politicians will change. Till then they will not change, because they've seen power with temple properties. They've seen how to make money with temple properties. They've seen how to favor some people, their own party men or whoever they want, in the name of temple administration, putting them in the committee members, and etc., etc. You know, there is so much clamor in Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam for cashew nut contract, for badam contract. They make crores. You know, the famous Tirupati Laddu, millions and millions. And to supply for these laddus and other things, there are contracts. And there are many other contracts in Tirupati. That's why the temple is not under any sampradaya, but only under government babus, who are, quote unquote, government servants. They are there to serve the politicians. There is an article 31A(1)(b) in the constitution, which says the taking over of the management of any property, any law providing for that, is okay. It will not be hit by Article 14. And they said they're going to build an airport there. See, there are agenda behind everything. So, politicians to change, people have to change.
Yes, for politicians to change, the people have to change, and that is what our mission is, and that is why we conduct these dialogues, and that is why we bring people like you and people like Professor Bharat to our platform in order to convince the people that, okay, the power actually resides with you, realize your power. As it is mentioned in Ramcharitmanas, the Hanumanji had to be reminded of his power. Yes, we told, Ka chupasadiraha ballavana. Why are you quiet? Realize your power. So, my appeal to all the great people who are assembled here and watching this show, that please realize your power. Ultimately, the power resides with you. And we've got a lot of questions. We will move now to the audience questions and answers. And before that, of course, I must remind all of our viewers to please like, subscribe, and share the video. And of course, do continue your support, for which we are always grateful. Let's move to the question and answer round.
Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
Okay, first question, and also before I start the question and answer round, I remind my two guests that we have actually introduced a system whereby we give an award to the best question in the form of a book. And I will shortlist those questions, you can also indicate, and then I will put it in front of the two of you to select the best question. So the first question, Dr. Aniruddhan Nambi, my question to Shri T.R. Rameshji. The moment someone talks about liberation of our temples, the bogey of Brahmin domination and takeover is raised. How to counter that and overcome it? Thank you.
Yes, we mentioned about it some time ago also. The moment they say free our temples, politicians say this is Brahminism, this is Brahmin patriarchy, this is corruption and all that. Let me remind you, I'll take the Tamil Nadu example. 44,121 temples are under the control of Tamil Nadu government, in Tamil Nadu. Of which less than 8,000 temples have Brahmin priests, which means 1/5 of the temples have Brahmin priests. They don't even have Brahmin trustees. Only the priests are Brahmin. The rest are from various castes. In some of the temples, even Dalits are priests in Tamil Nadu. Various castes. The former Shankaracharya had a Kuladevata, and the Kuladevata temple priest was a fisherman. Not the former Shankaracharya, so the late Shankaracharya, sorry. So the Brahmin bogi is only raised. To give a picture, temple means Brahmins, Brahmins means corruption, or Brahmin means dominance. This is nothing true in it. First of all, you have to see how many temple Brahmins are trustees, or they wholly control the temple. It will be a handful. Only a handful. Of course, the Chidambaram Dikshara's temple is a temple for 2000 years under the Diksharas who are Vedic Brahmins. The temple puja there is not as per Agama Shastras, it's as per Vedic way. As per the way rishis did the pujas. These are very, very few exceptions and examples, and they are the first among Tamil Saivites. So, the Brahmin bogi is not a reality, it is only a myth, and it is generated only to tell people that the temple should be with the government. And if there is anything about caste and discrimination and all that, the acts which take over the temple, the Hindu Religious and Charitable Endowments Act of the various states, they do not talk about caste. There is a different act for the Temple Entry Authorization Act, which talks about there should be no discrimination. So again, the takeover acts are not about caste, it's about administrative control, nothing else.
Can I just make one point here?
Yes, Ji.
You see, if we tell our people about the history of temples and how temples were created and prospered and they administered, we have to tell them that Brahmins only perform the puja part of it. Throughout history, Brahmins have only been doing the archana. But who made the temple? all the four Varnas made the temple, they contributed to it, or a king who was always a Kshatriya did it. Sometimes the bulk of the donations were made by the Vaishya community. The people who were the managers of any given sampradaya, the people who were in a particular jati and who were the local administrators of the affairs of that region, they were always non-Brahmins. Brahmins were not administrators. It's only very few Brahmins who went into government services, or there were certain castes, a class called Kayasthas. So the Brahmins really never had a role other than performing puja. And we should say this loud and clear, we should substantiate this with history, and we should say that this was nothing else except a colonial plot to defame the whole of Hindu culture, that in the name of Brahmin you wanted to take over the temple and appropriate the funds. That's all.
Oh yes, the Brahmin Bhogi is absolutely a Christian invention and a colonial invention. We know that, and the object is very clear because they wanted to completely sanitize the Sanatana Dharma of its strength, and that was the main reason. I think that should be very clear. Ajay Kumar Das, Modi started train service between Bangladesh and India. Don't you think this will bring instability in India? How is this relevant? This is not talking.
That's a different subject.
That's a different subject. Next. Abhi. Pankaj Semwal, Sanjay Saji. Uttarakhand has also imposed the Char Dham Act on the Char Dham, Gangotri, Badri, Kedar in the same manner. Can you explain in detail how to move? We discussed this.
Yeah,
It's already been challenged in the High Court. The High Court has given a judgment which is terribly flawed, and now the matter is in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, I think other parties have also joined.
I would like to add here, Sanjay ji, that I, as the president of Indic Collective, I have also challenged this judgment. I have filed the case before Honorable Supreme Court to set aside this judgment. And the people of Dharma has also filed a case. And Hindu Dharma Acharya Sabha, they have, that's a amalgamation of many sampradayas, ancient sampradayas in India. Hindu Dharma Acharya Sabha has challenged this judgment. They have also filed a special petition before Honorable Supreme Court.
Right. So that is how this is going to go. I just wanted to, make an interjection here, Mr. Ramesh. You've seen the points of reference that have been made in the Sabarimala judgment. You think those points, if they are answered properly, will address many of the problems that we face?
See, every time a sampradaya has a unique practice, and that is sought to be curtailed. In the Sabarimala case, it was I think it's a Muslim who filed the case.
Right.
And in Tanjavur, Brahadishwara consecration, it was a Christian fisherman who filed the case seeking Tamil mantras be used. So it's never the believers or the core believers, it's always somebody who wants to foment trouble. Now, the questions of reference this time around, if they are answered properly, we will have relief on many fronts. I hope the review petition happens within the next 1 month. Now that the COVID threat has come down, Honorable Supreme Court, if it convenes the 9-judge bench, and earlier they had planned about a total of 14-15 days total argument period, and then the court might take some time to deliberate on the judgment. So within a month they can finish this, and this will be the answer for many of our perennial problems relating to Hindu temples, Hindu rites and all that. The terms of reference are excellent.
Yes, I mean, a lot of them, I believe, actually emanate from the Shirur Math judgment, and they are clarificatory in nature as well.
Yeah.
That is why the 9-judge bench has been constituted, because Shirur Math judgment was 12 bench.
And I hope Sri Parasharan, who argued in the Ayodhya case, he also participates in the full in this Sabarimala matter, because a lot of clarification can come from the great senior counsel. I hope the case is heard at the earliest.
Okay. Gopal, the kind of electoral impact discussed by Sanjay Ji and Ramesh Ji requires organized and sustained mobilization of local community leadership. Is there such an organization that can be inspired to take this up? Why is RSS not saying this? I think both of you can address this.
No, I think Bharat Ji should address this.
Okay.
All right. Well, if you want my frank opinion, you see, the RSS itself has to make a decision about what is called Hindu ritual. I think, I don't know if I am treading on some toes in saying this. RSS has lots of Arya Samajis in it, and it has lots of reformists in it. Now, people, and this is not true just of the RSS. As a matter of fact, this is true of everybody, the secularists, the Congress, because the Hindu thinks that to be reformist is to be modern, is to take up the cause of Hinduism. But as a matter of fact, for last 150 years, it has had the opposite effect. You kill what is essentially Hinduism because you don't understand what is the Hindu ritual, what is the Hindu sanskar, what is the Hindu puja, manasa, vacha, karmana, and how it is done as a sadhana. So, I will not really depend too much on the RSS. I would depend upon an army of young people, people who are average about 40-45, who can argue things very well, who have now looked upon the Shastras and about the Indic tradition in an independent manner, who can discuss our traditions openly, academically, but with a good volume. These organizations, I think they have started coming up. I don't want to take any names, so I am very hopeful. Once they are more assertive, then change will come and politicians would have to listen.
Quite right. Okay, next question, Vichar Manthan. First of all, how do we convince the Hindus that temples need to be freed from government when the narrative is that the money is used for corruption? I think this is what I mentioned right in the beginning.
Removing the head for headache. Well, the corruption is there from ancient times, but that is not as big a problem as it is being made out. If somebody takes a bit of temple wealth here and there, that is not the main thing. That is not the order of the day. And there are solutions, far easier and simpler solutions for that. We see the Chola administration of the Grama Sabha, and it includes temple administration also. It's such a fine democratic manner. At the same time, as per our Shastras, there is transparency, there is accountability, there is so much. We can draw a lot of strength from that. What we need to do today is to add a lot of transparency and accountability. In this age of internet, it's not difficult. And we should plug the holes by which 98-99% of possibility of corruption should be taken away. Now, when we talk about, government administration and it is for freeing corruption, the most corrupt administration is the government administration of temples. They don't even have an external audit in Tamil Nadu, in Andhra, in Kerala. It is all internal audit by government babus. That itself is enough to show that corruption will be defended by the government. 1.4 million audit objections are pending from 1986 in Tamil Nadu temples. Even the audit objections raised by the internal audit team of the government is not being looked into. So, who is serving corruption? Is it the true trustees of the temple or the government? The answer is the government.
Okay. Next one.
This argument is fake. Let's move on. People should realize that it is the government that foments corruption, leads corruption in temples.
Kunal Ramani. सबको प्यार भरा नमस्ते. Please be kind enough to speak about misuse of the judiciary against Hindu saints. The saints are backbone of our society.
I don't know about the choice of word misuse of judiciary. Maybe some interpretations, or maybe it's not coming to the defense. Yes, there are instances. Like the Puri Matas, the ancient Matas being demolished by the BJD government recently, and Centre also not saying anything. And judiciary didn't intervene. First of all, they are heritage places, centuries old. The Mata, which is 8 centuries or 9 centuries old, how can it be an encroachment? But they were demolished in the name of encroachments. And it is not just about the saints, it's about Hindu institutions. And anybody can file a case against a saint in India, and court will give a patient hearing. And the patient hearing sometimes turns out to be detrimental to the Mata or the saint. So I think that's what the question is all about. Things have to change. Yes, I agree with you there, but it is not a misuse, it is misdirection and sort of a discrimination, I can say.
Okay, next, sir. Mr. Gopal is asking, so please name these young organizations. We who would like to support need to know who they are. If you won't name them, who will? So let me name 2 of them. Mr. Ramesh has mentioned them. Intake Collective, of which he is himself the chairman, and People for Dharma.
Okay, they are organizations I am associated with. Probably Professor has a few names in mind, but the legal mentor of Intake Collective, with Professor's permission I'm saying these words, and Sanjay, your permission also. He is someone who fits the words Professor said some time ago. Young, vibrant, vociferous, and standing for Dharma. With clear understanding, and you heard him argue in the Sabarimala case. In fact, in Kerala, he's the deity's lawyer. Because he said
it quite often.
Yeah. Because he said, my temple, my rules. He spoke for the deity. Professor probably has a few names in mind. And thank you for mentioning Intake Collective and People for Dharma. I'm also the president of an organization called Temple Worshippers Society, started in 2011. It has filed a lot of cases in Tamil Nadu. It's really making an impact there.
Yeah, I'll just mention that it's not specifically of the temple, but generally for Hindu revivalism, there is the Intake Academy. Then Upward, managed by Ashish Dhar, is doing a very good job in giving information. Now, you see, once this gentleman gets associated with these activities and start following them, then he'll discover that there are many people who are doing it. So there is no need to take names. He'll discover the people. Just join the company.
Okay. So a lot of you who have been with the Jaipur Dialogues would have been discovering that we have been discussing this issue also quite often. Vichar Manthan. After the temples are freed, how can we make sure that no misuse of money is happening and keep maximum transparency? Okay, friends, I haven't shortlisted a single question so far, remember.
Vichar Manthan ji, I would like to say a few things. most of the temples have very little income. There are thousands and thousands of temples in India. First of all, many of these temples do not have money to be misused. And the large temples, the administrative scheme should change. Today, the government scheme of administration is not helping transparency, it's not helping accountability. It is not serving the purpose for which the temples were established. For the propagation of the temple dharma and the special tenets. So, we need to revamp these schemes of administration according to the tenets, dharma, and the purpose for which the temples were established and they are maintained now. We need to make them, we need to ensure that the qualified trustees come for administration. We have monthly publication of expenses and income, transparency in tender process, etc. Audit by external agencies. We can plug 95% of the corruption or the misuse chances. And a person should be removed from the administration the moment even a small instance of mismanagement is proved against him. And he should be debarred. The earlier Chola system is this entire family was debarred. We should have some rigid practices like that. After all, it is Devata's money. Devata doesn't want the money. He wants his money to go for the community of deserving. And not just the poor are deserving, the scholars are also deserving. Those who help others are deserving. The Ayurveda doctors are deserving. The craftsmen, the artisans, they are deserving. So we should not just talk about poor people. Yes, poor people are very deserving, but it's a mixture. As Professor said, so whole community should benefit directly and as a whole.
I'll just add one small thing to it. You may not be able to do it on paper and constitutionally, but I would suggest that local legislators and members of parliament should not be part of these managing committees.
Okay. Wonderful person. Exactly.
I mean, I'm very clear about this. Very
the
clear.
legislators.
Yeah.
Whereas they have every temple management, they are the compulsory members these days.
And also the retired IAS, police officers and judges with some
Yeah.
restrictions they should be.
No, I think if we make a category of people that look, if you have to have a committee of let us say 15 people, then there will be people like this. Some acharyas, some architects, some people knowledgeable in Agam Shastras, some musicians, some dancers, some people who have done genuine social work, not of the reformist kind, but regarding the temple. So if we have a category of people who will enrich the life of the temple complex according to traditional lines, not according to modern lines, then we will have dedicated people looking after the deity. You see, it is basically bhakti to the deity which should be ensured and which would bring results.
The Travancore Padmanabha Swami Temple Committee was one such committee, the ancient committee, as per tradition, as Professor said.
Yeah.
There were 8 members who had 1 vote each and half a vote for the king of Travancore. He had half a vote. Basically, the 8 is not an odd number but an even number. So if they could not agree, the half vote will be cast at that time. Till then the king never had a vote. Only if there is a disagreement, he will come in the picture as a balancing measure. They had a wonderful system. The ancient systems are well thought of. So we should have a look at them and incorporate the best features of them.
Okay, next question. This is the first question that I'm going to shortlist because this appears to me to be a good question. Is Hinduism simply a conglomeration of various sampradayas? If yes, why are Hindu classified as majority and discriminated against vis-a-vis Abrahamics? Both of you can take this question.
I will just say a very short thing. I'll leave it to Professor. This question is both about Article 26 and Article 30.
Correct.
Well, that's very well put in constitutional terms, but in terms of definition or in terms of lakshanas or characteristics, the sampradayas are there because we permit diversity because we believe in unity. You see, almost all Hindu darshanas are based on the idea that sarvam idam khalu brahma. So every sampradaya is part of that unity, reach to the divine according to its method. So we give freedom, but at the same time we are following one single goal. And that is why we are beyond sampradaya and sampradaya as well. So we cannot be treated like the sampradayas or denomination. A sampradaya is not a denomination. Then it has to be protected ethnically or in terms of an organization or a particular church like the Eastern Church or the Catholic Church or the Pentecostal Church. It's very different because you make your own sampradayas. 500 people make sampradayas in India. Therefore, sampradaya has to be taken as a sampradaya. It has to be given a constitutional definition, sir. This is what my demand is. We have to make it clear and give it a constitutional status.
We'll now move a little quickly because we are well over time now. भरत वेद प्रकाश, मंदिरों की प्रबंधन समितियों में गैर हिंदुओं की नियुक्ति के बारे में आपका क्या कहना है? सरासर गलत है, आप तो क्या कह सकते हैं इसके?
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल
100% wrong.
Right.
Chaitanya, can we have a Hindu board like how we have madrasas using temple money after freeing temple? Ramesh, what do you say to this?
No. When the institutes are to be run as per the sampradayas, and the Vishnu temple in Srirangam will be different from the Vishnu temple in Travancore. The deity, we have to go by the deity. If we have a Hindu board, then there is no difference between the new board and the Chardham Act, which Uttarakhand government has now formed. That board. It has to be different. See, we are Sanatan Dharma. Sarve Jana Sukino Bhavantu, everybody will subscribe to. But our acharyas, the Sampradaya acharyas, the traditions and the paddhatis, the agamas, they will decide how they will do their dharma and their preaching and propagation. We should not mix the one money and then we appoint a pope. Then there will be pontification. The board chairman will become a modern Hindu pope. We don't want that.
Right.
Abhishek Pathi, Supreme Court has given legal power to Puri Shankaracharya to run Jagannath temple, but still Odisha government is not obeying. So what can be done? Contempt petition can be filed. That's the simple answer.
Contempt can be filed, but will it be heard? That's a different thing.
Chaitanya, Brahmins do puja, Kshatriya protect temple, Vaishyas donate to temple, and Shudras make and maintain temple. Will this help the temples to become a center of unity? As everyone is taking part in serving God, Ishwari.
I agree with Chaitanya in a large respect, but they do it as a seva, voluntarily, and as a karma, dharmic duty. Yes, everybody has a role, and it is not jati or varna based exactly, but it is something they can do by being part of the Jati and Varna. If I'm somewhere wrong here, I request Professor G to correct me.
I think this is a good question.
Very good question,
Like
but
shortly.
you see, the jatis and varanas are evolving right now, and they were always evolving as a matter of fact. So, if the guiding principle can be only one, which is what is it that the temple and the deity needs, and whosoever can offer the service should be made part of that. It cannot be on the basis of a status or a jati. Modern temples would need many things, like they would need some experts in computer and technology also to for security, for various kinds of things. So these are the new jatis that would be needed in order to maintain the functioning of a modern temple. And you would need many things. I think whosoever can serve the temple, whosoever has faith in the temple, whosoever loves the deity should join the service. That should be the standard.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
And now we have, this is the question that I was thinking of asking. Good that it has come, so this will also I'll shortlist. Rajinikanth's party supposedly promises to modify annual HRCE. Will he and parties like Hindu Makkal Kachchi in support of freeing temples change discourse? I think this is a very good question, because I think for the first time I remember a political party has come up with this kind of thing.
Yeah, Rajinikanth's party is yet to be registered and become a thing, but he has a tremendous following. I'm sure it will become a big party. And it can only grow if Rajinikanth gets into it. Now, for the first time, a statement has been given, I think, on behalf of this party. It's not come up from Rajinikanth himself. That the two things came. One is all temple encroached lands will be recovered and due income will be realized. Second, he will alter the government department, that is the HRMC department, which looks after the temple, or completely do away with it. This is a very, very bold statement. For the first time, a political party, especially in Tamil Nadu, has made this. Now, I think the dialogue will now change. Since he raised this, others will also have to say something about it. They can't get away from, saying that Waqf properties will be protected, the income will be realized, and the temple properties, the encroachers will be given pata of the land. They can't take two different stands anymore, I think. Let's see, but that's a very encouraging thing. And I think if the virus catches on, in fact, in politics also, the virus is very important. If the virus catches on, then things can really move fast. Yeah, sometimes it's virus, sometimes it's a bacteria which does good. So it was probiotic, I think. Either way, it will serve our purpose. Okay, in honor of your service to our nation, thank you, sir. Thank you, Avinashi. Thank you for your support. Thank you, Jigarji, for your support. Neeraj Srivastav, I wish larger temples to help to set up independent umbrella like organizations, which in turn support smaller dharmic institutions, fight for dharmic causes, influence quality, and guide them. Is it practically possible? Most of them are under government. How will it become possible? No. See, the thing is, the moment the true income is realized, and today anyone who is having real estate is king. Take Swaminarayan sect. They have real estate and they build beautiful institutions. So similarly, other temples, other large temples, once they are freed from government control and once they get their potential income, they should be able to build institutions. And there should be people like Professor to guide them. Each of these institutions, they should have meritorious men, scholars, who can think in dharmic way and guide them in dharmic way. That is very important. The Renaissance will not happen on its own. Next question, Jyoti Samarias. Namaskar. My question is, why big institutions like Gita Press, who have a voice and have a reach, are silent about it?
And same with the Kathavachakas and Jad Munis and saints. Well, I think what Gita Press has done, very few have done, so I think we cannot say.
Gita Press has done what some matas and some big temples have failed to do, the propagation part of it. They have done a fantastic job. In most Indian languages, they have published not just the Puranas but also the Niti Shastras. They are not silent. We need to support them, we need to make them bigger, and we need to emulate them. As for Jain Munis, I have not seen them, agitate or anything like that. They lead a austeric life. And yes, if they have to speak out, they will speak out. And they have included in the Sabarimala review petition. One Jain sect has done that from Bombay. They have engaged a very senior council. I hope something good comes out of it.
Okay, that's
I
very
have-
interesting.
Also, you want to say something?
I have
Yes.
one small suggestion, which I keep saying in whichever forum I have an opportunity, and I hope Dikshit ji would allow me. I think Bharat Ratna should be given to Jay Dayal Govindaka, who started Kalyan, and Hanuman Prasad Poddar. These two people, they have done as great service as anybody can do in the preservation of Indian texts. And I hope someday this will happen.
Yes, we must start this as a campaign. But I think I will try and take it up to date itself. Jigar Thakur, US temples are administered by Patel, etc. Danger of middle class domination is real if others are not protected and given representation in committees.
We need some more information on this. Maybe there's something there that is not participatory.
I think US conditions may be different from what we have here. So I'll pass it over for insufficient information. Dr. Anirudh Nambi, do you think one of the fundamental issues with Hindus is that we use temples transactionally for kamyartha bhakti and generally not bothered after offering our prayers? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, that's a good question. So let's shortlist this as well.
Well, 95% are Kamyartha Bhakti only. We do not know if they not bothered after offering prayers. I do not know. 95% of the visitors to the temples have some prayers. I won't call them entirely Kamyartha Bhakti. Who will you go to? Like a child goes to the parents for anything and everything.
Yeah.
Child doesn't know whether he is deserving, we should have it, or this father is or mother is capable of giving it up. Whereas Bhagavan is capable. So we all go to him. Perhaps we do not know what to ask. Sometimes we know what to ask and we are getting it. I can't entirely say we are not thankful.
If,
I don't know what Dr. Nabi wants to say. Prosaji?
I think we should no longer be ashamed of Kamyartha Bhakti. This is another spin which has been given in order to denigrate Hinduism. If Kam, like Artha, is one of the Purusharthas, then fulfillment of Kam is necessary to lead a healthy and a good social life. And if I want my good Kamas, my good desires to be fulfilled by the deity, then as was just said, who else should I go to? I will only go to God. And secondly, if you look at the people who are promoting Christianity today, they are talking of Jesus will take care of everything. If you have him in your heart, then he will make you pass the exam, he will get your job. So, Kamyartha Bhakti is being promoted always and always by everybody in order to get close to the divine. We should not be ashamed of it. And temples,
right.
lastly, temples are made for grihasthas. You see, it is the grihastha ashram people who go for temple, not sannyasis. So it is kamyarth.
Okay, next one.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Mayor, should temples be used as a place of Hindutva politics to create awareness against communist Islamic forces as the easiest way to reach out to larger public regularly with widespread base?
Well, one thing I can say is, with the government presence in our temples for the last 2 generations, we have lost something called the voluntary force of temple activists or the temple devotees, the network of temple devotees. Today in Tamil Nadu, you don't do the cleaning seva, which was done for decades, but they have a housekeeping agency. They have a security agency. Earlier, everything was voluntary services. People pitched in and they had a network. And this network of devotees can answer all these threats of commies and evangelism and all these things. That is being taken away, I would say, some time ago indirectly. Now it is being taken away directly. So we must bring back the network of Sevaites, and that will be an answer to most of these problems.
Yes. We look at the sacred Gurudwaras. I think they are fine example. Jyoti Samaria, can we replicate the temples that are free as model temples? Successful effort should motivate and inspire the others.
Yes, there are free temples. For example, the Jalagandeshwara temple. It's inside a fort. It was due to some Islamic invasion. The temple was not in use, and the ASI had it. Then the people of Vellore in Tamil Nadu, they took over the temple again. And today it's being run by a committee of 24 people from Vellore town who come from various sectors of the society. They run it beautifully. They run the temple exceedingly well, and government of Tamil Nadu wanted to take over it because the main reason is it is being run extremely well, and for them it's a bad example. The same reason they wanted to take over Chidambaram temple, because Chidambaram temple does not have hundis, it does not have landed properties, yet it has 6 pujas a day, done beautifully, and 6 festivals in a year, of which 2 are major festivals, and 300-400 families survive based on the temple. And that was a very bad example for the government of Tamil Nadu. So that's why they wanted to take over the temple. So the Jalagandeshwara temple, in my opinion, is beautifully run. And yes, it is not something of a blue moon or something very rare. We can run our temples in pristine manner. It is not rocket science. It is Dharma Shastra.
ओके जब अभी की न्याय की व्यवस्था सनातन धर्म के अनुरूप नहीं है तो क्या न्याय की अपेक्षा करना ठीक होगा? भाई हमें प्रयास तो करते रहना पड़ेगा और ऐसा कुछ नहीं है, प्रयास करने से ही समस्याओं का समाधान होता है. गोपाल जी, रमेश जी, can the 9 years review include rights for Ghar Wapsi for all temples and just an institution or two? Well, this question is can be simply answered that the references are already settled and there can be no new reference added. Next one. That's all we have. Thank you to all viewers. And before we part, let's do the final job of I'll present 4 shortlisted questions before the 2 guests, and you have to choose the best out of those 4, which we can award. So the first one, this is the last one. I think which larger temples can be set up an independent umbrella-like organization. Then
Professor was just viewing the question, then it disappeared.
No, I got it.
Okay, this is just to brush up your memory for those 4 questions. This is Chaitanya. Brahmin do pujas, Kshatriyas to take temples, Vaishyas donate, you know. Then, third one, Rajinikanth's party. That's Rajinikanth, okay. And the next one.
We have 3. One more question is there.
One more. Is Hinduism simply a conglomeration of various sampradayas? These are the 4 shortlisted questions. So, please choose the best one.
One of our professors chooses.
No, I think you are a greater expert in temple
No.
art and
I'm
temple.
so glad today I got to know Bharatji. And Sanjay ji, before parting, I want you to have this video as a whole and a lot of bites from Professor Ji, which can be spread across India and beyond. A lot of smaller bites.
Yes, that we are doing now for most of our videos, and we'll make special bites for videos.
Special bites.
This needs to be propagated. That job of propagation, which is guaranteed to
I
us.
think it was a good session, even though I should not say it myself, but a lot of answers and a lot of what Professor said today, Indians need to know, Hindus need to know.
Quite right. In fact, with Professor, we have done one on Manusmriti, another one on Kama Sutra, then we are going to do one on Natya Shastra also. That is
Fantastic.
Very soon. All these, what is called our Shastras, which are mostly neglected and which are not well understood. Professor Bharat books.
And they are and these are so connected with our temples. All these.
Exactly. So,
I would go with Chaitanya's question.
okay.
Yeah,
Which
I
is
would-
also interesting.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
Okay. So that is it. So that Chaitanya can be congratulated.
Right.
Congratulations, Chaitanya. So you won this prize, I think for the
Yeah.
second time.
The other 3 questions are also very interesting.
Yeah,
and
very good.
thought-
Thank you, Mr. Ramesh, and thank you, Bharatji. We had a wonderful session, very, very productive, and I think it has answers to most of the queries that people generally ask. And let me congratulate both of you, as also the viewers who had such a wonderful experience listening to these 2